My name is Carol, and a few days ago I watched my son Philip load 55 pounds of premium meat into coolers for his wife Joyce and her mother Gloria to take home. $500 worth of ribeye, brisket, and lamb that I spent 2 days preparing. But they came to the event empty-handed. They brought nothing, not even a side of chips, but somehow I was the villain for suggesting they contribute something to the family barbecue. Despite not bringing anything, they had the audacity to complain. Joyce was standing there with her arms crossed, telling Philip how dry my brisket was, while her mother Gloria shook her head at my over-seasoned ribs. But what they didn't know was that this little performance of theirs was about to cost them everything. Because after 3 years of this nonsense, I was finally done being the family doormat. Joyce rolled her eyes and said, "Carol, there's plenty of food. Don't be selfish." Selfish. That word hit me like a slap in the face. After spending half my monthly grocery budget on premium cuts and getting up at 5 in the morning to start the smoker, I was selfish for wanting to keep enough food for the other guests who were still eating. That's when something inside me finally snapped. If you think family drama can't get any crazier than this, make sure to subscribe because you haven't heard anything yet. And let me ask you this. Have you ever had family members who criticized your cooking while taking all of it home? Let me know in the comments because I thought I was the only one dealing with this kind of madness. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. And what happened next changed everything. My name is Carol. For 37 years, I had been the family gatherer. Every holiday, every birthday, every celebration had happened at my house because I loved bringing everyone together. After my husband passed 5 years ago, these barbecues became even more important to me. They were how I stayed connected to my family, how I showed love. When Philip married Joyce 3 years ago, I was thrilled. Finally, someone to help with the hosting, to share the traditions with, to pass my recipes down to. Joyce seemed sweet at first, always complimenting my cooking, asking for tips, saying she wanted to learn everything from the master. I thought I had found a daughter I never had. But somewhere along the line, the dynamic shifted. Joyce stopped offering to help and started showing up like a guest at a restaurant. Her mother Gloria began attending too, always with suggestions about how I could improve dishes I had been perfecting for decades. Can you imagine? This woman who never cooked a meal for my family was telling me how to season my grandmother's secret rib recipe. The first time Gloria criticized my potato salad, I laughed it off. When Joyce started arriving empty-handed while expecting to leave with containers full of food, I told myself she was just busy. When they both started picking apart every dish I prepared while helping themselves to seconds and thirds, I convinced myself that this was just their way of showing they cared about the food. Still, I kept hosting. Because that's what family does, right? We overlook the little slights, the entitled behavior, the lack of reciprocity. We focus on the bigger picture, keeping everyone together. At least, that's what I told myself every time I swallowed my pride and smiled through another family gathering where I did all the work and got nothing but complaints in return. I was so desperate to keep my son close after losing my husband that I let them walk all over me. And they knew it. It started with small requests. "Philip, can you pack some leftovers for Joyce's lunch this week?" Became, "Can you make sure we get enough brisket for Joyce's work potluck?" Which eventually became Joyce showing up with a cooler and a shopping list. She'd walk through my kitchen like she was at a buffet, pointing at dishes she wanted packed up. "Make sure you give us extra of that potato salad. Gloria's Bridge Club loved it last time." Last time? When did my food become their catering service? When did my kitchen become their personal restaurant, where they ordered takeout for their friends and coworkers? The criticism started subtle too. "Carol, this sauce is a little sweet for my taste," she'd say while loading container after container of it into her cooler. "Next time maybe go easier on the garlic," she suggested as she scraped every bit of my garlic herb butter off the corn. The audacity was breathtaking, criticizing my cooking while taking every last bite of it home. Philip would just shrug when I mentioned it. "She's just particular about food, Mom. You know how some people are." But I noticed he never defended my cooking when Joyce criticized it. He just nodded along, like her opinion mattered more than the woman who had been feeding him for 34 years. I watched my son turn into a stranger who prioritized keeping his wife happy over protecting his mother's feelings. Every barbecue became a performance where I cooked for hours. They complained about everything, and then they packed up containers like they were doing me a favor by taking my subpar food home. The worst part? I let it happen. I stood there smiling while they turned my acts of love into their personal meal prep service. I was so afraid of losing my son that I lost myself instead. This particular barbecue was supposed to be special. Philip had been promoted at work and I wanted to celebrate properly. I spent $500, half my monthly grocery budget, on premium cuts, dry-aged ribeye, choice brisket, rack of lamb that I had never splurged on before. I marinated everything for 24 hours, got up at 5 in the morning to start the smoker, and made every single side dish from scratch. When Joyce and Gloria arrived, they walked straight past me into the kitchen. No hello, no thank you for hosting, no, what can we help with? They just immediately started inspecting the food like health department officials coming to shut me down. This brisket looks dry, Joyce announced, poking at meat that was perfectly tender and juicy. And why is everything so salty? Carol, you know Philip has to watch his sodium. Gloria chimed in with her usual wisdom. At Joyce's age, I was already adjusting my cooking for my husband's health. It's called being considerate. Considerate? I had just spent half my monthly income celebrating her son-in-law, and she was lecturing me about consideration? I watched them fill plate after plate, criticizing every single dish while eating second and third helpings. The expensive lamb that had cost me $60? Too gamey. My grandmother's potato salad recipe that had been in our family for generations? Heavy on the mayo. The corn I had been grilling the exact same way for 20 years? Overcooked. But the final straw was when Philip started packing their takeaway containers without even asking me. He was loading up my premium ribeye like he was working at their personal catering company. If you're getting as angry as I was, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to get wild. And tell me, what's the most expensive meal you've ever made for ungrateful people? I thought $500 was bad, but some of your stories might top mine. Because what happened next made that money seem like the least of my problems. Philip, what are you doing? I asked, watching him load the last of my expensive ribeye into Joyce's containers. Just packing up some leftovers for Joyce, he said casually. Leftovers? There were still people eating. I had invited my neighbors, my sister was coming by later, and here was my son treating my home like a free grocery store for his ungrateful wife. Those aren't leftovers, I said firmly. There's barely enough for who are still here. Joyce rolled her eyes. Carol, there's plenty of food. Don't be selfish. Selfish. That word hit me like a lightning bolt. After spending $500 cooking for 2 days, getting up at 5 in the morning, and listening to them criticize everything I lovingly prepared, I was selfish for wanting to keep enough food for my other guests. Something inside me snapped. 3 years of biting my tongue, 3 years of swallowing my pride, 3 years of being treated like hired help in my own home. It all came rushing out at once. Get out, I said quietly. Joyce blinked. Excuse me? Get the hell out, I exploded. All of you, take your containers and your complaints and get out of my house. The entire backyard went silent. My neighbors stopped talking. Everyone was staring at me like I had lost my mind. But I didn't care anymore. I was done being the family punching bag. Philip stepped between us. Mom, calm down. You're embarrassing yourself. Embarrassing myself? I was defending myself. But Philip couldn't see the difference. He was more worried about his wife's feelings than his mother's dignity. That hurt worse than anything Joyce and Gloria had ever said to me. Because at that moment, I realized I had lost my son long before I lost my temper. Philip chose Joyce, of course. Right there in front of everyone, he told me I was acting crazy and overreacting to nothing. He said if I couldn't treat his wife with respect, then maybe we needed some space to cool off. Space. From my own son. Because I refused to be disrespected in my own home. They left with their containers, taking my 3-year-old granddaughter Sylvia with them. Philip said he'd call when I was ready to apologize. Apologize for what? For having self-respect? For refusing to be treated like a servant in my own kitchen? The house felt empty after everyone left. My neighbors were uncomfortable and made excuses to leave early. My sister Margaret arrived to find me crying in my kitchen, and I couldn't stop replaying Philip's words. "You're embarrassing yourself." Maybe I was embarrassing myself. But what was more embarrassing, standing up for my dignity or being a doormat for 3 more years. 3 weeks into our silence, the stress caught up with me. I was at the grocery store when my chest started tightening, my left arm went numb, and I could barely breathe. The paramedics said it was a minor heart episode, not a full attack, but a serious warning that my body was shutting down from emotional stress. Margaret rushed to my bedside and immediately called Philip. But when she told him his mother was in the cardiac unit, Joyce got on the phone. I could hear her voice through Margaret's speaker. "She's just trying to manipulate Philip into apologizing. My grandmother used to pull the same stunts when she didn't get her way." Philip didn't come. His 65-year-old mother was lying in a hospital bed with heart monitors beeping, and he chose to believe his wife over his own sister-in-law's panicked phone call. That's when I knew I lost my son completely. The stress of losing him had literally put me in the hospital, and he thought I was faking it for attention. I went to Dallas to stay with my sister Margaret for what was supposed to be a week. It turned into 2 months of the best therapy I had ever had. Margaret didn't sugarcoat anything. She told me I had been enabling Joyce's behavior and teaching Philip that I had no boundaries. "You raised that boy to respect women," Margaret said, "but somewhere along the line you stopped demanding he respect you." The heart episode had been a wake-up call. My doctor said stress was literally killing me, and I had to choose between my health and trying to maintain toxic relationships. The choice was easier than I thought. In Dallas, I rediscovered who I was outside of being Philip's mother and Joyce's free caterer. I took cooking classes, not to improve my skills, but to remember why I loved cooking in the first place. I joined Margaret's book club, started going to morning yoga, and even went on a few dates with a nice widower named Frank. For the first time in years, I wasn't planning my life around someone else's expectations. I wasn't calculating how much food to buy based on how much Joyce would want to take home. I wasn't biting my tongue when someone criticized something I had worked hard on. I wasn't walking on eggshells in my own kitchen. I was just Carol. And Carol was pretty great company. Frank would compliment my cooking without backhanded comments. The ladies in my book club appreciated my homemade cookies without telling me they were too sweet. My yoga instructor praised my dedication without suggesting I could do better. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself after toxic people tore you down, hit that subscribe button, because this transformation gets even better. And let me ask you, have you ever had to choose between your health and keeping peace with family? Because that choice changed everything for me. Little did I know, while I was learning to love myself again, Philip was about to learn some hard truths about his wife. 2 months later, Philip found out about my heart episode from my neighbor Patricia at the grocery store. She casually mentioned how worried everyone had been when the ambulance came, how she had been checking on my house while I recovered in Dallas. Philip went white. What ambulance? What hospital? That's when he realized Joyce had lied to him. She had convinced him Margaret was being dramatic, that I was faking a health scare for attention. But Patricia had photos on her phone. Me being loaded into the ambulance, the neighbor ladies bringing flowers to an empty house. Philip called Margaret, sobbing. She told him everything. How I had collapsed at the store. How the doctor said stress-induced cardiac episodes were serious at my age. How Joyce had dismissed it as manipulation, while I was literally hooked up to heart monitors. But the final straw came at Joyce's family barbecue. When Joyce criticized her own mother's cooking and started packing containers, Philip defended her mother the way he had never defended me. Joyce's father shut him down immediately. "That's my wife you're talking about. She spent all day preparing this meal for ungrateful people, and I won't stand for disrespect in my house." Philip realized he never once defended me the way Joyce's father defended her mother. For 3 years, he watched his wife tear me down while I cooked for them, hosted them, and gave them everything I had. But when someone else's mother was being disrespected, suddenly he found his voice. Worse, he had let Joyce convince him his hospitalized mother was lying for attention. While I was recovering from a stress-induced heart episode, stress caused by their treatment of me, he was believing his wife's lies, instead of trusting his own family. That night, Philip finally saw Joyce for who she really was, and he didn't like what he saw. Philip drove to Dallas to apologize in person. Not a phone call, not a text. He showed up at Margaret's door with tears in his eyes and a speech he had been practicing for 200 miles. He admitted he failed me as a son, that he had chosen peace with Joyce over loyalty to the woman who raised him. But worst of all, he had let Joyce convince him to abandon me when I needed him most. "You were in the hospital because of the stress I helped cause," he sobbed. "And instead of being there, I let her convince me you were lying. What kind of son does that make me?" "The kind who had been emotionally manipulated for 3 years," I told him. Joyce had systematically isolated him from anyone who might challenge her behavior. Starting with me, she turned every reasonable boundary I set into evidence that I was controlling. She twisted every moment I stood up for myself into proof that I was dramatic. She convinced him that his own mother was the problem. But I wasn't angry anymore. Seeing my son cry, seeing him finally understand what Joyce had done to both of us, I just felt relief. My boy was back. The divorce took 6 months, but Philip fought hard for custody of Sylvia. Joyce tried to paint me as the unstable grandmother who faked heart problems. But Philip's testimony about her lies and manipulation, combined with my medical records, painted a clear picture of who was really unstable. The woman who convinced a son to abandon his hospitalized mother wasn't fit to have primary custody of anyone's child. Joyce moved back to Ohio with her mother Gloria. Good riddance. They could criticize someone else's cooking and take someone else's food home. They were no longer my problem. Philip and Sylvia lived 10 minutes away now, and our relationship was stronger than ever. But it was different too, built on mutual respect instead of one-sided obligation. Philip helped plan gatherings now, contributed food and money, and shut down any behavior that disrespected my home or effort. My heart was healthier too. Turns out cutting toxic people out of your life was better than any medication for stress-related cardiac issues. I still saw my cardiologist regularly, but my numbers had improved dramatically since removing the source of my stress. I still loved hosting family barbecues, but they were smaller now, filled with people who appreciated what went into them. Frank came sometimes, and he always brought wine and complimented my cooking genuinely. Sylvia helped me in the kitchen, learning recipes and traditions the right way, with love and respect. When she asked me to teach her my grandmother's potato salad recipe, she listened carefully, took notes, and thanked me for sharing something so special. No criticism, no suggestions for improvement, just pure gratitude for being included in our family traditions. Sometimes people asked if I regretted breaking up Philip's marriage. I didn't break up anything. I just stopped pretending that being disrespected was the same thing as being loved. The best gift I gave my son wasn't more free food or endless patience with his manipulative wife. It was showing him what self-respect looked like, even when it nearly killed me to learn it myself. Sometimes you have to lose people to find yourself. And sometimes, if you were lucky, you got the good ones back before it was too late. If this story taught you anything about setting boundaries with toxic family members, make sure to subscribe for more real-life stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping your self-respect? Because I learned the hard way that you can't have both. The good ones will come back, the toxic ones will show themselves out. Either way, you win.